All right, 1 week of training camp is in the books. So who's been standing out? Who's had a good camp so far? Who's been making plays to impress? We're breaking down the Killer Bees. That's a nickname I just gave them off the top of my head right now because their names all start with B. The Killer Bees from the first week of training camp on today's Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Okay, nobody's going to call them the Killer Bees. That was just something I came up with just now. As I wrote down their names just to remind myself on this massively scribbled legal pad. There are 4 names written down here of players who've been standing out through the first week of training camp. I'm going to talk about those guys today. That's what the topic is for today. And as I wrote them all down, I realized, their names all start with B. But it's like, some of them, it's their first name that starts with B. Some of it's their last name. Some of them, technically one of them is actually a nickname. 2 of them are on offense. 2 of them are on our defense. Nobody's going to call them the Killer Bees. That's not how it's going to be on this particular show. But it's funny that they all start with B. It's a funny coincidence to notice. And so I'm going to say it made for a nice intro. But it is 1 week through training camp. Started last Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. They got a week down. Not exactly 7 practices. I think they had a day off or 2 in there. But it has been about a week. So who's been standing out? Who's been getting noticed? We're going to talk about it here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know the deal. As always, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. That's where I spend most of my time writing articles and putting up features and videos and slideshows and posting on the message boards. And that's where a lot of other Pitt fans spend a whole lot of their time, is the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And those message boards where Pitt fans are hanging out literally all day, every day. I checked the boards before I started taping this video. I'll check them again after, and there will be new posts to read, new threads to contribute to, new things to reply to, new thoughts to consider, some more ridiculous than others, but all worth reading if you are a Pitt fan, so you should check it out at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe so that we know that you appreciate what we're doing here. I'm going to act real needy and insecure. I just don't know if you like us. I just don't know if you like these podcasts and these videos. Should I keep doing it? It's been like a year now. Are you people ever going to like them? And some of you do. But we have a lot more views than likes, so let's try and get that ratio up. We also have a lot more... I shouldn't say more views than subscribers, but you can see the percentages that we've got X number of subscribers and we get X number of views, and only a certain percentage of the views are actually coming from subscribers. So first of all, if you're subscribed and you're not watching the videos, what are you doing? And second of all, if you're watching the videos and you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Like this video and subscribe, and then we'll all feel much better about ourselves in the morning. So the first week of training camp, who's been standing out? Who's been making plays? And a lot of this is going to be based on what we see and what we hear. We don't see all of practice, of course, but we watch some of it. And we obviously talk to the players and talk to the coaches and talk to different people about how camp has been going. And the guy that I'm going to start with, the first Killer Bee, if you will, is somebody that you definitely heard a lot about yesterday. And I knew from the moment I saw it in practice on yesterday morning, I knew everybody will be talking about it. So they put on full pads for the first time yesterday. Yesterday was the first practice in full pads. The NCAA has rules about how many practices you have to have in no pads at all, how many practices just in shoulder pads, and when you can actually go full pads, live, full contact. And so yesterday was the first day that Pitt could put on full pads. And I guess as a treat to the media or something, Pat Narduzzi had ran one period during the media window. We had watched 7 periods, and one of those periods, period 5, I think it was a live full contact period, 11 on 11, actual football. They ran 6 plays of real, honest-to-God football, and we got to watch it. If it sounds like I'm being ridiculous and sort of celebrating this, I am, but it's also true because we don't get to see much of that. There are very few times we get to see a quarterback throw a ball to a wide receiver with a defender also in the play. We don't get to see that. We might see a quarterback throw a ball to a receiver. We might see a receiver and a DB work on a drill together, but we very rarely get all 3 at the same time, or a running back, an offensive lineman, and a defensive lineman. We don't see that happen very much during our, half hour, 45-minute media viewing window. So Pat Narduzzi gave us a period of full contact that we could watch yesterday. And it was the first play of the drill, the first play of the period. And if you read the message boards at Panther-Lair.com or follow any Pitt writers on Twitter, you have seen about this play. You've heard about this play. And it was the most notable play by a guy who I think is poised to have a big camp and a big season, one Bub Means. The play, Phil Dracovic drops back to pass. Bub Means goes down the left sideline. He's got MJ Devonshire in tight coverage. Good coverage. There was never an issue with the coverage on this play. As a matter of fact, it was tight. It was physical. Could have been called. Could have drawn a flag, but didn't. Phil Dracovic put the ball up there, gave Bub Means a chance to go up and make a play, and Bub Means went up and made a play. A really impressive play. A great catch against MJ Devonshire's tight coverage. And, a big-time football play. A big-time receiver catch. On the sideline, kept his feet in and all that kind of stuff. And it was a great catch. And Bub Means is one of these guys that, I've talked about him a lot, dating back to the spring. When he had, I think he had 2 catches in the spring game, and both were pretty good plays. And I always remember the second one was a play in the spring game, and I talked a lot about it on the Morning Pitt the day after the spring game, or the Monday after the spring game, as it were. And Phil Dracovic threw to Bub Means. He was surrounded by about 4 players. They weren't all covering him. It was a little zone. He sort of found a soft spot in the middle of it, and Dracovic put the ball up, but he put it in a spot where Bub Means had to jump. I think he had to jump. I knew he had to fully extend, and I believe he had to jump to catch it. And if he didn't, it was going to be a tip drill, probably interception by one of those 4 guys standing around him. But Bub Means made the play, and it was really notable to me for a few reasons. One, a wide receiver making a big play, is notable no matter how you slice it. 2, Phil Dracovic trusted him in that situation, which told me at the time and continues to tell me that Dracovic obviously built some trust in Means over the course of spring camp, that he would put the ball up there and give him a chance to make that play, which makes me think that he probably was making those plays throughout spring camp. And it was just an impressive play, an important play. They need to be able to make those kinds of plays. You need to have a Dracovic to Means connection for this passing game to really take off. Now, that's not to dismiss anything Konate Mumfield may do, and I think he's capable of a lot this year. I think Konate Mumfield can be far more impactful than he was a year ago. I think he can put up a stat line closer to what he did at Akron, and I think he can put up a stat line that exceeds what he did at Akron. I think he's a really good receiver. I don't think it always showed last year. I think there was partially an adjustment to Power 5. I think there was, just inherent issues in the passing game that are not necessarily Konate Mumfield's fault. So I think he's going to be a big-time player. I think he can do really well this season. I have high expectations for Konate Mumfield. But Bub Means, with his size and his speed and his athleticism, can truly be a game changer if he can become a consistent wide receiver. Now, we haven't seen the consistent side of it, sort of down to down, being consistent in his routes and catching a high percentage of his targets, 65%, somewhere 70%, something like that, minimizing drops and all those things. That's a snap-to-snap, rep-to-rep thing that the coaches are going to have to identify and analyze, and that Bub Means where he really needs to improve. But if he can make the big plays, he's got to get the consistency. But the big plays, that's where the ceiling is. And I think the ceiling is really high for Bub Means. And a catch like we saw yesterday, catch like he made in the spring game, if he can do this consistently and be just sort of solidly consistent in kind of the snap-to-snap things that a wide receiver has to do and those responsibilities, I think it just means a whole lot for the passing game and opens up a lot and could, I think it could be a really big, deal. I think you start to develop a little bit of optimism about the passing game if you start to believe that Bub Means can be a big-time player here. If you convince yourself of Bub Means' effectiveness, you can start convincing yourself of this passing game really taking a big step forward from where it was last year. A lot of that's going to depend on Phil Dracovic, of course, but having a guy who can make plays in the passing game, a receiver who can make plays, downfield plays, contested catch plays, those kinds of plays, if that can be Bub Means, the ceiling rises on where this offense can be, this passing game and this team as a whole. And again, that's not to put everything on Means. I think Konate Munfield's going to be really important. Obviously, a couple more receivers are going to have to step up. Gavin Bartholomew, Malcolm Epps. I mean, there are a lot of guys who need to make plays to get this passing game off the ground. But Means has looked pretty exciting in a few different instances. The other guy on offense that I think, it's not like the coaches are sitting back talking him up a whole lot any more than they have in the past. It's not like over the first week, Pat Narduzzi can't stop talking about him or something like that. But the other guy on the offense that I think is generating some real buzz, to keep with the theme of B words, is Ryan Baer. As a redshirt freshman offensive lineman, I mean, we've talked about Baer all offseason. I've talked all offseason about how Baer and Branson Taylor and Ryan Jacoby were going to be in this three-man battle for the two spots on the left side of the line, and whoever the two best players were out of that group, those would be the guys who would start. With Baer's versatility, his ability, having been cross-trained at tackle and guard, really allowing Dave Borbley and the rest of the staff to pick the two best linemen out of that group. And I've talked about that. I talked about it all offseason. I talked about it throughout the spring. I talked about it throughout the summer. But now there's a new wrinkle, because maybe Baer is not limited to the left side of the line. Maybe he could potentially play right tackle or right guard. Ryan Baer could play any of those four spots. And he joked that he did snap at one point in high school, not for any extended period of time, but I don't think you're going to put him at center. But left tackle, left guard, right tackle. Ryan Baer already might be one of the best offensive linemen on this team. I mean, he might be a top 2 or top 3 offensive lineman on this team. And I think the world of Matt Gonsalves. I think the world of Jake Cradle. I think Blake Zabovic's good. I think Branson Taylor's good. I think Ryan Jacoby's going to be good. Ryan Baer, might not be too far behind. If you want to say the top offensive lineman on this team in 2023 is Matt Gonsalves, I'll say, yeah, I agree about that. If you were to say Jake Cradle's number 2, I'll say, okay. But I'm not putting Baer any lower than 3. And I might even put him higher. Quite honestly. Seeing him get some work at left tackle yesterday, which was the first time I noticed it. I mean, I'm sure he's probably been doing it off and on. But seeing that the coaches have enough faith in him and confidence in him to not only work him at tackle and guard, but also on both ends of the line, which, is probably not as difficult a transition as moving between tackle and guard. But seeing them effectively train him to play 4 positions. Maybe he's not getting any right guard snaps. When they had him at right tackle, which I saw, they had Matt Gonsalves over at left tackle. And so maybe it's about, trying to get Gonsalves work at left tackle. I don't know. And it might just be a one-day thing in training camp. But I think it's clear that they trust Baer in a lot of different spots. And I'm starting to feel like they probably believe Baer is one of their top 5 offensive linemen. Whether that bumps Jacoby out of the top 5 grouping or Taylor or whoever it is, it's probably one of those two, I would think. I think it's less about them and more about him. More about him being one of the top 5 linemen on the team and probably higher than that. I think Ryan Baer has an enormous ceiling, and I think he's going to be really good here for multiple years. I think you're talking about a multi-year starter, and a really good one at that. Multi-year starter, multi-year all-conference selection, and who knows what his career will be after college. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. He's played 3 or 4 games, and he's a redshirt freshman, but I think the ceiling's pretty high for Ryan Baer. All right, on the other side of the field, 2 guys who I think have been standing out, and they both start with the letter B. One the first name, one the last name. And one guy, look, I wish I had like a little like engineer's hat, because I've been driving this hype train for a long time, and it's Bengali Kamara. And you guys know that. Just like I was driving the hype train on Izzy Abanikanda for a couple of years leading into last year. And so I was sort of eating my words before, after 2020 and 2021. But I finally got it right last season. But I've been driving the hype train on Bengali Kamara as well. I guess Bub Means is probably another train that's leaving the station here, and Ryan Baer is about to pull out as well. But Kamara, I just think the ceiling is just sky high for him. And Pat Narduzzi yesterday, said just got to continue to work on his motor and consistency. We expect more details. It's like we want you to be better than you were in the spring. There's constant progression there, and if you're not getting better, you're staying the same, and that's not good. He said that about Bengali Kamara and Shane Simon. But I asked him a question yesterday. I asked, is there another player you've coached who you would compare to Bengali in terms of the physical attributes, with his size, his speed, his athleticism? And he said he brought up a guy named Turna Nandi. Turna Nandi was a player who played for Narduzzi at Miami of Ohio back in like 2004, 2005, 2004, 2005. Narduzzi says, quote, he says, he was a freak. He was one of the first freaks out there. Turna Nandi was his name. He kind of reminds me of him a little bit. So I looked up this Turna Nandi to find out who Turna Nandi was. I was curious, who is this guy? I mean, I've never heard the name. I guess I'm not well versed in Miami of Ohio linebackers in the mid 2000s. He ended up being like a 5th round draft pick of the Colts, I think. Bounced around to a couple different NFL teams, practice squads, never really caught on. So you'll forgive me for not knowing the name Turna Nandi, and I will forgive you for not knowing it. But I Googled it, and what I found is this dude really was a freak. He was like 6'3", 230, or 6 foot 230 or something like that. Not the tallest guy, decent size. Ran a 4.5 540 in the 2006 NFL Combine, 39-inch vertical leap, a 10.4 broad jump, and a sub 7 second 3-cone drill, 6.97. You compare all those numbers to linebackers in this year's NFL Draft Combine, those would have been top 10 results. So obviously tested well. His real claim to fame is in the bench press. He did 41 reps. This Turna Nandi did 41 reps in the bench press. First time a non-lineman has ever topped 40 reps in the bench. And actually the only time a non-lineman has ever topped 40 reps on the bench. That's a record that still stands. He did 41 reps. No non-lineman has ever beat that number. So this dude really was a freak. I mean, a freak with his testing numbers. And that's the first name that came to mind when I asked Pat Narduzzi if there's a comparison point for Bengali Kamara. And I think that says a lot. I mean, because as much as we talk about him being a physical freak and being able to fill the stat sheet and having all these different things that he can do, for Narduzzi to go there with probably one of the most physically gifted players he's ever coached, just in terms of pure physical gifts, pure athleticism and speed, for him to go there, that's pretty telling to me. Maybe Narduzzi's driving that hype train too. Now, I do think with Kamara, there's probably an element with Narduzzi, or Randy Bates might do it too. Ryan Manilak a little bit less, but I could see Narduzzi doing this of, having sky high expectations for Bengali Kamara and believing his ceiling really is that high, but also wanting to make sure that he keeps putting in the work. So he doesn't want him to get too high on it. So when he talks about him in public, talking more about, how much work he's got to do on details and how much he's got to keep working consistency and all these kinds of things, while secretly thinking this dude is going to blow up. This guy's going to be a killer. And maybe that's because I think the dude's going to blow up and he's going to be a killer. I think he's going to stuff the stat sheet this year. I'll do a prediction on the linebackers later this week because I'm writing about the linebackers every day. This week it's linebacker week on Panther-Lair.com. And I'll write a prediction later this week, but it's going to be about Bengali Kamara. It's going to be about stuffing the stat sheet, and it's probably going to be about him making the all-ACC team. I might go so far as to predict all-conference first team. I just think that highly of him. Woo woo! Train is leaving the station. And the Bengali Kamara hype train is leaving the station. All right, and then the fourth guy, sticking with the linebackers, sticking with the guy whose name starts with B. It's his last name, and he got a little shout out yesterday. We actually could go with two guys whose name starts with B. Jeez, all three of the freshman linebackers have a B on their name. Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace. And I'm picking Bass because they brought him out to talk to us yesterday after practice, which is a little unique. Post-practice interviews, we don't get to choose who we talk to. We don't really, we can make a request if we want to. It may or may not get honored. It's all chosen by Pat Narduzzi. Narduzzi picks which guys are going to come out to talk to us after practice. This sort of developed out of the COVID year, and it's just kind of stuck since then. And so when Pat Narduzzi sent Jordan Bass out to talk to us yesterday, all of us, I'm not the only one who had this thought, but all of us thought, okay, he might be turning some heads. And Narduzzi actually talked about Bass earlier. Before practice, he said Jordan Bass, where's the quote that he had? He had a good... Jordan Bass is still learning, but you can watch him burst and run, and you're like, holy cow, he's going to be really good. And Bass was a guy that we talked up a lot. When you talk about driving the hype train, we talked him up a lot in the recruiting process and talked about how he was arguably, maybe the best player in the class, one of the top two, maybe three, and certainly no worse than three recruits in the 2023 class that Pitt signed. And so we've been hyping him up. He was a safety and a wide receiver, moving up into the defense to play linebacker. He fits that mold of the big safety who can play the star linebacker position. And even though he's being trained at all three, according to him, but we really hyped him up as being a potential playmaker at linebacker. And it seems like his first week of training camp has backed that up a little bit. I think Pat Narduzzi's been impressed. But we really should give shout-outs to the other two Bs, too, in the freshman linebacker group, because Rasheem Biles is getting some positive pub, and Braylon Lovelace was, according to the coaches, one of the best freshmen that enrolled in January, and participated in spring camp. And it was actually a big group of freshmen with some big-name guys, and Lovelace, from Leechburg stood out as much as anybody. But we're going to highlight Bass here because it seems like he's been having a really good camp. All three of those freshmen, though, are going to be in the mix for playing time, either special teams or in the defense, providing depth at linebacker. In an ideal situation, you won't need those guys at linebacker this fall because Bengali Kamara and Shane Simon and Solomon DeShields and Brandon George and Kyle Lewis will stay healthy, and they'll take all the snaps, and you won't need to play those freshmen. But in a different ideal world, they're so good that you can't keep them off the field, and they move into the rotation, and maybe even, probably not the starting lineup, but they move into the rotation as freshmen because they're just that good. Both of those scenarios would be ideal for different reasons, but I think no matter how it goes this year, the future's really bright for Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, and Braylon Lovelace. So that's 4 or 6 players who have stood out so far. We're going to go with 4. I'm just going to stick with Bass, but I couldn't talk about Bass without bringing up Biles and Lovelace. But that's 4 guys who have stood out so far through the first week of training camp. I'm sure we'll have an updated list next week. New guys that are getting talked up, new guys who are making plays. And as long as they're, as long as 2 of them are Bub Means and Bengali Kamara, I'll be good with it. We'll keep talking up those guys. Listen, don't forget, tonight we have our live show at 8:30 p.m. The Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Me and Jim Hammett will be together talking about all these things from training camp and more. We'll talk about conference realignment. We'll talk about NIL, and we'll talk about what we've seen out of Pitt so far through the first week of camp. So tune in for that tonight at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then head over to the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We will talk to you tonight on the live show, and then we'll be back with another Morning Pitt tomorrow right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.